of course, we've got to kick things off with Chris Wilder, who has been sacked as manager of Sheffield United. Multiple sources say he's being dismissed after failing to win promotion last season. It's claimed there's been disagreements over the club's recruitment plans. Former Hull boss Rubén Sellés is reportedly set to replace him. Now, we'll get on to Sellés shortly, Justin. But we speculated after the playoff final whether Chris Wilder could go. Rumours have been circulating for the past week over his future, and now he's gone. What have you made of this, Justin?
It's one of them. I didn't see it coming, but I'm also not surprised. I think with new owners, they bring this sort of uncertainty with existing managers anyway. And I toyed with the idea last summer, I mean, we both did actually, of obviously if the takeover happened this time last year, will the new owners want a new manager? Obviously, with the team going so well, they're not going to replace him halfway through a season when they did get the takeover completed just before the new year. So really, it's not a surprise. But at the same time, I didn't see it coming, because how often do we see a manager replaced after a 92-point season? Come on, how often does this happen? But at the end of the day, look, if the new ownership want to head in a new direction, it's for them to do it. But that comes with pressure, because I think it's worth pointing out that Chris Wilder represented the fans, didn't he? And he represented the club in every sense. So I think there's a touch of sadness there. But I think what he's done in leading a rebuild of the club and giving the club the best chance of growth I think it's had in years, in my opinion, should be acknowledged, and it should be appreciated as well.
Yeah, and I think a lot of Sheffield United fans will appreciate what he's done for the club over particularly the past season. And I'm seeing a lot of mixed emotions from Blades fans, some very annoyed. And I think the overarching emotion is just sadness, really, because, you know, he is a Blade through and through, isn't he? He is Chris Wilder, who is one of them, you know, and that is going to be something that really, really makes Blades fans emotional as they come to terms with this news because of everything that he's done. But it comes as Sheffield United are now reportedly using AI to sign players. They've made 3 signings so far using artificial intelligence, including most recently a 20-year-old attacker from the Bulgarian league. I can't imagine this is something that Chris Wilder is on board with, Justin.
Bloody woke, isn't it? Using AI. Come on. Utter woke nonsense. Yeah, you can see why. I mean, his opinion on data this season has been funny. I mean, what happened to just flying to watch a player, for goodness sake? Come on. But I think this is obviously a clear source of, I imagine, frustration for Chris Wilder, because he has a very, I wouldn't say an old school view on football. I think it's very much just a mainstream view on how football should be played, how people should be recruited and whatnot. And I think with using an AI model, it's a completely different direction that the club is taking. I know a lot of people will bring in comparisons with Brighton and Brentford, but there's a huge difference between using AI specifically to target players and actually using a data-led approach. I think AI is a bit different.
That's not the same thing,
no,
is it? It's similar, but it's not the same thing, I don't think, is it? And you're right, Chris Wilder has made his feelings known about that kind of thing in the past. Back in March after the Steel City derby, Wilder said, stick your data where you want to stick your data. And I think that's a good...
CC your employers.
Yeah, I think that's a good indicator of where he stands on woke things like AI and data analytics. I was very interested by this, Justin, and to test how good AI is at finding players, I asked ChatGPT who Derby should sign this summer. It recommended Hector Cipriano, who signed for Watford 4 weeks ago, and also Eber Adams, who signed for Derby last summer. So I think that is conclusive proof that AI knows nothing when it comes to football recruitment.
What's better recruitment, AI or the Sunderland recruitment team of the 17-18 season? Why am I looking at Ibrahimovic on this list?
It's a very good question to raise, and I'm sure Chris Wilder has his feelings about that. But look, this is where I stand on the whole matter. Did the job Chris Wilder did last season warrant the sack? No. Yeah, it was disappointing to miss out on promotion in the main season and then the playoffs, but he massively turned Sheffield United around. It shouldn't be forgotten how atrocious they were last time out in the Premier League. And there were serious doubts from a lot of people, especially us, over whether he could get them competing this past season. And he proved all those people wrong by doing what he did. 92 points won last season, the most ever in a championship season by a team who weren't automatically promoted if you ignore their points deduction. In most seasons, that sees you go up. So, yeah, of course it's harsh to sack him, but you've also got to say that Chris Wilder was partly to blame for them not going up. That 1 week where they lost 3 in a row really cost them. He seemed to lose his head in that 1 week spell. The playoff final, he saw his team throw away a 1-0 lead with 20 minutes to go. I think he has shown elements of weakness when it really mattered this past season. And the way I look at it is Sheffield United have to essentially reset now and ask themselves, what's the best chance we've got of getting promoted next season? If they think it's signing players with data and AI, then so be it. They run the club. They need the best man to oversee that. They clearly don't think it's Chris Wilder, Justin.
Well, this is what I mean with the owners, choosing to take a different approach, and that's absolutely fine. I think it's pretty harsh to blame Chris Wilder for the lack of success at Sheffield United this season. I think, go back to that playoff final.
I think it has been a successful season, Justin. I wouldn't say it's been an unsuccessful
lack of promotion
season.
In that case.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, he did everything he could to turn around the 3-game spell that cost them automatics, didn't he? He called out the players, and ultimately it's the players' job to go out and get results. And then going to the playoff final, yes, Wilder can take criticism, but he didn't give the ball away in the middle of the park like Kiefer Moore did. These are fine margins that games are won and lost on. And unfortunately, I think to say that Chris Wilder's a fairly decisive figure in that, I think is quite harsh. I think it's a collective thing.
He's the manager.
Yeah, he is the manager, but again, he's not giving the ball away in the middle of the midfield, is he? It's a collective. But you've got to point the finger at the collective. But
the collective, Justin, that's exactly right. You've got to look at what happened from the 70-minute spell onwards, and Sheffield United look rattled from that point. We said that straight after the game. If you're the manager, you're meant to manage the players' emotions from that point, and I don't think Chris Wilder did that very well. And the 1-game spell that I spoke about where they lost 3 games against Oxford, Plymouth and Millwall, that was an absolute clanger of a week, and it all seemed to stem from Chris Wilder losing his head.
Yeah, but again, it's very easy to blame Chris Wilder for it. It is.
No, I'm very in the middle on this. I think Chris Wilder can be blamed for them not getting promoted last season, but I think you've also got to respect he got them there in the first place, which I think it was a lot harder thing to do than a lot of people will give him credit for.
Yeah, it is. But again, I sort of just taking issue with a couple of points. Maybe it's harsh language on Wilder as a general, because I think you've got to look at the success as opposed to what didn't happen, because ultimately the club rebuilt themselves. The squad had to be rebuilt. And I think for Sheffield United to have a 92-point season in the midst of a rebuild, despite having parachute payments, I think is a huge success. So I think I would look at that as opposed to the 20-minute spell in the playoff final, for example, because Chris Wilder cannot control that. It's your leaders on the pitch that controls that. That's a very, very important thing to consider. But I think, in terms of the club going in a different direction, it makes some sense. And at the same time, it doesn't make any sense at all, because obviously the success that Chris Wilder had with the points, but also them just going in a different direction with a completely different model to what Chris Wilder probably believes in. That's where you probably look at it and go, well, it's never going to work in the long term, is it? So let's make a change now. And ultimately, that's what the board have done.
The big question I would have here is, if Sheffield United didn't mess up the final 20 minutes of the playoff final, if they won the playoff final, would the club have sacked him? I'm guessing probably not.
I think they do, because there's ultimately still a philosophical issue here with how the club's going to recruit going forwards. This is what we're risking
a massive blowback, sacking a fan favourite like Wilder after he got them promoted to the Premier League, don't you?
You are, but you're missing blowback now. You're risking blowback now, aren't you? It's one of those scenarios where it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't kind of thing. I think, and again, the Sheffield United board, I genuinely do believe if the takeover was completed before pre-season last season, Chris Wilder probably would have gone. It's an easy time to make a change, and it's an easy time to make a change now. And as I say, you can put the reasons for it purely down to philosophy, as we're reading and as we're knowing now.
Interesting. Well, what do you think of Sellés coming in to replace him, Justin? We've spoken about him a lot in recent weeks after the ridiculous decision to sack him at Hull. Is he the right man to lead the Blades going forwards?
Is he the right man? He's very different. He's a very different temperament. He's a very different coaching style. And he's
very different.
and he probably fits that mould better than Chris Wilder when it comes to sort of the recruitment model and philosophy that the board are obviously instilling at the club. I do like the appointment because I do like Rubén Sellés, but I think it comes with risks, though, naturally. You can, and I say you can rate the appointment, but still acknowledge some of the potential flaws in it. I think the positives being that he's going to develop players, which I think he has over Chris Wilder. And that's not to say Wilder didn't do that, but Sellés is more comfortable with working with what he's got in front of him, whereas Wilder needs your wily old pros, mixed with some real talent in their peak years, amongst with a couple of youngsters. But I think trait-wise, there are similarities to Chris Wilder and Rubén Sellés when it comes to wanting to play with a high intensity, wanting to play with aggression, and not being nice to play against at all. And Rubén Sellés has spoke openly about it. So I think as an appointment, I do rate it. It's just one that's quite cautious because of the potential hangover with Chris Wilder. He was very popular amongst the squad. He's very popular amongst the fans, and that puts a lot of pressure on a young manager who's never had a top-end championship job before.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely spot on there, Justin. I agree with everything you say there. I really like Rubén Sellés, as we've said loads in recent weeks. He did a cracking job at Reading and then did a really good job at Hull and never deserved the sack. I think he showed a lot of promise in both of those jobs, and it's definitely going to be interesting to see him at a club who aren't a complete and utter shit show behind the scenes. Is he a better manager than Wilder? I think you can make the case for it in a kind of different way, depending on which way you look at it. Even though Sellés has been managing at a lower level than him in the last couple of years, I don't think it's an outrageous claim to make that he could do a better job than Wilder this coming season. My main worry is Sheffield United fans, by and large, seem very angry about this decision, and I completely get why, but in my experience, it's never a good position for a new manager to be in where he's having to instantly win round the fans. 9 times out of 10, a new manager has the full support of every fan. I'm not sure Sellés will do here. And then if things don't start well, questions will instantly start being asked. Oh, why on earth did we sack Wilder? This bloke doesn't seem much better. That's what I worry about here, because it massively cranks up the pressure on a new manager when they really don't need it in the first place.
Yeah, it's a really good point to make. And as I say, I think Chris Wilder presents that unique scenario. Obviously, when Chris Wilder left before, Paul Heckingbottom came in, and he was in the coaching staff, and he had a period of being an interim manager already. So he had a bit more of a stay of execution. And obviously, then you go back a couple of years, the last person to replace someone within Sheffield United, i.e. Heckingbottom and Chris Wilder, was Slavisa Jokanovic. Didn't go well. And there was pressure from the start because of the hangover. And that being said, Rubén Sellés could, have the same circumstances underneath him. I think the thing is with Rubén Sellés is, I think over a year to 2 years, I think he has success. I think Chris Wilder guarantees you success within a year in a certain way, whereas I think Rubén Sellés needs a little bit more time to build his playing style, build his squad, build his philosophy and his coaching. Whereas I think Chris Wilder can come straight in. Well, that's it, isn't it? There's going to be a lot of pressure on him. And that's why I think it's near lunacy for Hull to have sacked Rubén Sellés, because I think, as I say, over time, Rubén Sellés will be a success. But it's just whether or not he gets that time at Sheffield United for a team pushing promotion in year 2 of parachute payments. There's a lot of pressure.
How many times has there been a manager who's been sacked after finishing 21st in the Championship the season before and then got a job at a team fighting automatic promotion? It's a bit of a mad scenario, really, isn't it? But that's the mad circumstances we found ourselves in here. So, yeah, it's going to be an interesting one, that we can say for sure. Let's move on, Justin, because Rob Edwards is set to become the new manager of Middlesbrough. Borough have reportedly agreed compensation with his old club, Luton, who were still paying him in some shape or form. And he's fought off competition from Steve Cooper and Danny Rule. He's going to be announced later today. We spoke about who would be the best appointment for Borough last week, Justin. You prefer the other 2 candidates to him. But do you think Middlesbrough's chances of getting promoted next season have improved with Rob Edwards being appointed, or are they just about the same as they would have been if Carrick was still in charge, or perhaps even gone down?
I think it's just about par. I'm not overawed with the appointment. I think if you go back to previous episodes, I'm not a huge fan of Rob Edwards, and the way I described it recently is I think he needs to step into a job that has a little bit less pressure, where he gets a chance to build. Whereas Middlesbrough, I think he's going into a role that ultimately there's going to be a pressure to get into the playoffs, and the squad's going to be ready. Is ready built for him. Has he got the players who can play his style of play? Maybe. I know you will say that the style of play is similar to Michael Carrick's. I disagree with that because there's a heavy emphasis on wing backs for Rob Edwards, whereas it's not quite the same with Michael Carrick. So there's transition there. But ultimately, what they need is a decision on their manager, Middlesbrough, so they can start planning. Because we're getting very close to pre-season, so for things to be this late, it can impact the season coming ahead.
I think their chances have gone up. Only ever so slightly, but I think their chances of promotion have increased with this appointment. And I think it's simply because 12 months ago, if Middlesbrough had the chance to get Rob Edwards, it would have been an astonishing move, wouldn't it? His stock was sky high. And yes, it's taken a bit of a battering after last season. But as I've been saying over the past couple of weeks, I don't think that past season should be held against him as strongly as you may think. It doesn't make him a bad manager, does it? He's still obviously very talented. What matters now is that he's learned from the mistakes of last season. And look, things at Middlesbrough had gone stale under Carrick. I think they were getting to the point where they were actually going backwards under Carrick. So that's why, in my eyes, their promotion chances have gone up with Rob Edwards being appointed. And hopefully, fingers crossed, we get the Rob Edwards pre-last season. Because if we get that Rob Edwards, then Middlesbrough will be absolutely laughing, Justin.
Yeah, I understand the sentiment. And you are right. He's not a bad manager because of a bad spell. But I think there are red flags. Because he's not gone through a period of where it's been really tough for him until last season. And ultimately, that test came and he failed. Obviously, Watford didn't really get a chance. Luton in the Premier League was a bit of a free hit. Let's be spirited in how we approach games and ultimately get results. Won promotion the year before that, and obviously won promotion with Forest Green Rovers. So when the tough times have come, they've not been often with Rob Edwards, but when he eventually did come and knock on the door, he failed spectacularly. So that's where I have a few red flags with him. That's where I think time out of the game, if you like, can improve and can help and can aid a manager in their development. So I think in terms of me passing judgment on Rob Edwards, I need to see how they vary things up and approach games, because ultimately if they go in with the same ideology as his Luton team did, I don't think this Middlesbrough team will be a success at all.
I don't think they will approach it with the same ideology, Justin, and you've raised your scepticism about this appointment plenty over the past couple of weeks. We get it. You hate Rob Edwards. That's fine. But I just look at it and think, the stuff you were mentioning now about not being able to turn it around, how many managers do get the chance to turn it around? He didn't get the chance at all at Watford, as you're alluding to. And then Luton, yes, it all went very badly
enough to turn
very
it around
quickly.
at Luton.
He did, absolutely. But was the problems from last season all down to him? We don't know, and we may never know. So I think I'm willing to kind of glaze over last season for now, even though it's very difficult to, and just kind of hopefully look ahead to seeing the Rob Edwards that we all loved prior to last season, not the one who spent most of last season looking very sad, because that's not what we need. We want to see his gleaming pearly whites all over again, Justin. And we'll finish off the manager chat by talking about Bristol City, who have a new manager following the departure of Liam Manning. They brought in Gerhard Struber, who some may remember from when he managed Barnsley 5 years ago. Since then, he's been at New York Red Bulls, RB Salzburg, and was most recently in charge of Cologne. Justin, if you got me to make a list of every manager we've ever spoken about in the time we've been covering the Championship, and then asked me to rank them on how likely I think they are to be the next Bristol City manager, I'm not sure I'd have too many managers below Gerhard Struber. It's such a left field appointment.
Is that it? My reaction to that is that Ian Wright meme, isn't it? Where he sees his teacher from years ago. Yeah, Gerhard Struber. What? Wait,
Mr. Struber, I thought you were dead.
I thought you were in Germany. Yeah, it's so left field. You are right, because he's been bouncing around Red Bull for a long time. a very, very long time, actually. So for him to end up at Bristol City, Ashton Gate, is incredible. It's a weird one, isn't it? Because I think principle-wise, there's a lot to like about Struber. There really is. I mean, he laid the foundation style-wise for Valérien Ismaël to have that successful season with Barnsley. But ultimately, what has Struber achieved? That's where I sort of lie a little bit sceptical. His Barnsley team only stayed up because of Wigan's point deduction, we must bear in mind. He underachieved with Salzburg, RB Salzburg, and his New York Red Bull team. I think they made the MLS playoffs a couple of times. And then he got sacked by Cologne because they, while they were in the automatics, because they felt they had a better chance without him, which is incredible, really.
Yeah. Here's one for you, Justin. It's a bit like the Star Wars meme, isn't it? Where you go, Gerhard Struber, I've not heard that name in a long time. You know, you're a big Star Wars fan. Do you get that one?
Yeah, but I lack a little bit of respect for it coming from you.
Fair enough. Don't care about Star Wars at all. But yeah, Gerhard Struber is such a random appointment by Bristol City. But I tell you what, I don't hate it. And here's right. When he was at Barnsley, he did well. He pulled off the great escape. And yes, he got helped by Wigan getting a points deduction. But from that point onwards, he kind of set the foundations for them to go on and finish in the playoffs the following season. And I remember us being quite excited about him as a manager at the time. So it was quite disappointing when he decided to move to New York. Then, as you say, he underwhelmed at RB Salzburg. They failed to win the Austrian League for the first time in 11 years in their one and only season under him. And then last season was a bit of an odd one at Cologne. Towards the end of the season, them and Hamburg were both in the promotion places. Then Cologne had a bit of a wobble and Struber was sacked with 2 games to go. They ended up winning their last 2 games and won the title. So a bit of a bittersweet one for him, I imagine. But the mad thing is, Justin, their underlying data from last season is some of the most insane I've ever seen. In terms of XG, Cologne were easily the best team in the German second tier. And my eyes nearly fell out my head when I saw their actual numbers, because I don't think I've ever seen a team underperform the XG to this level before. Their expected goals for last season was 73. They only scored 53. So, in a way, he was sort of unlucky at Cologne, I think. They should have been promoted easily, and just because they could not put the ball in the back of the bloody net, that ultimately cost them. So I think it could be a very, very interesting move. If he gets Bristol City playing like Cologne were last season, they could be very good next season. So while I find this to be a very random move, I also find it to be a very intriguing one, Justin.
Intriguing is a good way of describing it, to be honest with you. And just by the way, Michael Carrick and Middlesbrough want a word on underperforming XG by the
even they didn't do it to this extent. 73 XG from 53 goals scored it's mad. I've never seen anything like that, honestly.
Yeah, it's quite astounding. I think defensively, principle-wise, Bristol City will be a lot stronger than they were under Liam Manning. That's what Struber will bring you. You want his team to defend high, you want them to press aggressively. And I think with this squad, there are a lot of positives. I know I was being very sceptical earlier on, but ultimately, it's a risky appointment because it's very left field. I mean, he's been out of England for a long time, and it's very difficult to actually pinpoint whether or not he'll have success here. But I think obviously, if you can get Bristol City cooking as he was at Cologne, then maybe they will be a success. But ultimately, is the squad good enough to put those chances away that, if they do replicate that same numbers at Cologne, is the squad good enough? Are you going to back Sinclair Armstrong to score 10, 15 goals and Narky Wells to do it again? There's a problem in itself. It's with recruitment. But ultimately, this is a very, very intriguing one. I think the young, energetic element of the Bristol City team makes it very exciting, but there are holes in it.
Yeah, I could definitely see this one being one where it goes very well or very badly. I'm not sure there's much of an in-between. But yeah, it's going to be a really, really fascinating one, just because it's, as we've alluded to throughout this short section, it's a name I had almost completely erased from my mind, Justin, and now he's back. So yeah, it's going to be very intriguing to see how he goes. Just we'll have a quick break, shall we? After that, we'll have the latest on the soap opera that is Sheffield Wednesday and all the latest transfer news from across the Champo. Welcome back to the Second Tier podcast. We're here talking about the latest news from across the Championship. But before we get onto that, may I take this opportunity to point everyone in the direction of the latest video on the Second Tier YouTube channel. It's called The Club Who Lost an Entire Golden Generation. Who is that club, I hear you ask? It's none other than Derby County. It's all about the young players who have come through the club's academy in the last 6 years, none of whom are at the club anymore because of Derby running out of money. And while trying your best not to spoil who any of those players were, Justin, it is genuinely quite insane how talented that generation was, isn't it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people overlook. I mean, you can do it with any academy, really. But I think a lot of people will overlook how good that group of players was. I mean, just going through that list in that video, the amount of money those players have accumulated in fees is ridiculous. But also going beyond that, the players that you mentioned, there are others who are playing league football. Jordan Brown was in that same mould. He at Leyton Orient doing very well. Lee Buchanan obviously went to Werder Bremen. And he's now at Birmingham, although he was injured last season. So there are others still, in amongst the professional pyramid, if you like. So yeah, it really is a lost generation of players for Derby, and I think from Derby fans' perspective, one of bitterness. We could be so wealthy right now.
Well, it could have been a very different story, wasn't it? if it wasn't for Mel Morris spunking money on Kamil Jozwiak and Joseph Zoon or whatever. But the 10 players on that list, 7 of them grew up within 25 miles of Pride Park Stadium. 5 of them have already had a transfer fee of £5 million or more in their career, and none of them are at Derby anymore. So honestly, give it a watch. It's quite astonishing thinking they were all at Derby at the same time just 6 years ago. And of course, make sure you subscribe to the Second Tier YouTube channel for all the content from us. Right, let's get back onto the news from across the Championship. And it's time for the latest on Sheffield Wednesday, the club who are really dominating the summer for all the wrong reasons. So the latest is that all non-playing staff have now been paid. Hooray, that's good. However, a large chunk of senior players remain unpaid. And just a reminder that there's another payday coming up in 11 days. They've now officially been given a 3-window ban on paying transfer fees for players, meaning they can't do so until January 2027. Meanwhile, the Sheffield Star has spoken to an intermediary who has been trying to stimulate a takeover of Sheffield Wednesday. He believes Chansiri does genuinely want to sell the club, but has called the current asking price an unrealistic and astronomical figure. Here's a quote from the piece, Justin. "I've gone back to 2 parties with that sort of number, and the response was hysterical laughter on both occasions." And this is the stalemate we currently find ourselves in, Justin. Everyone wants a sale of Sheffield Wednesday, but as has been reported for several months now, Chansiri is asking for a ridiculous amount of money.
Yeah, well, we know that Chansiri is a fairly unreasonable guy, and we know his valuation of Sheffield Wednesday is far beyond, I mean, just based on what we've heard in reports, it's far beyond what is a realistic expectation of what you can sell Sheffield Wednesday for. And ultimately, he's a big problem. He's a huge, huge problem. And I think that the factor I want to point to is how many clubs have we covered now, Ryan, over the years that we've been doing this podcast, and we've had almost episode by episode updates on clubs, and how often those clubs almost gone tits up?
A lot.
Yeah.
We've spoken about Derby County, Reading, Wigan. Yeah, it's it happens an awful lot. And Sheffield Wednesday, this feels like a proper stalemate, doesn't it? Where exactly. I genuinely don't know what the end goal here is. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's down to one person ultimately. And we know, I say we know, the reports that we get is Chansiri's open selling club, and he said it before, but ultimately his actions aren't really aligning with those views. The club isn't worth nearly as much as he thinks it is. If you bear in mind that Derby, Hull was sold for around 25 million when Akinele Kylie bought them, and that's probably, I mean, I'm not a businessman or to that extent, but that's where I would value Sheffield Wednesday, because the academy isn't churning out loads of players. They've now got a transfer ban. It's an aging squad. There's not many assets. There's just a lot of problems at Sheffield Wednesday that make it very unattractive. So if an offer comes in, as I've said before, get rid of something that's hemorrhaging money so you can start to pay your bills. Simple.
Yeah, well, the intermediary has said that parties have come forward with offers of around 50, 60 million pounds, which seems to be more than enough to any normal human being for a club like Sheffield Wednesday. But instead, what they've been quoted back is, sort of Premier League level valuations, which seems absolutely mad, doesn't it? Because if this was a club who were on the edge of the Premier League, then maybe you could make excuses for it. But it's Sheffield Wednesday, a club who have been stuck in the Championship / League One now for several years, don't seem to be progressing any further, don't seem to have a huge amount of talent / big assets available on their roster. And as we sit here right now, they've just been given a 3-window ban, which means they won't be able to pay transfer fees for any players for the next 3 windows. So until January 2027. So what's the attraction here for investors? We know Sheffield Wednesday are a massive club. I get that. But going forwards, there doesn't seem to be much else in the way of attraction to me if I was a wealthy businessman. The other thing I would say is that the rumours, for the lack of a better term, that I've been hearing is that Chansiri may not be able to afford anything lower than what he's been quoting. And if that is the case, then, well, Sheffield Wednesday are stuck in limbo for the foreseeable future, Justin, which is a really, really scary thought.
Well, and that's why I alluded to us, when we're having episode by episode updates on certain clubs, it never really ends well. It ends in the most difficult circumstances for those clubs, and it's not good. And I think Sheffield Wednesday, similar to Derby, similar to any clubs that find themselves in this situation, it shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening. Not in 2025 after we've had numerous clubs have to go through it. But unfortunately, I think the longer this goes on, the less attractive Sheffield Wednesday becomes, and ultimately that's going to affect the value that they're going to be valued at. Simple.
Yeah, and it's just going to keep going down and down and down, particularly if the fear that has been spoken about in recent weeks happens, where if the Wednesday players who haven't been paid don't get paid again in the next payday, then they have the right to rip up their contracts and walk away, given a certain amount of notice. And then that would just make Wednesday even less attractive. So what I just don't really understand what the goal is for Chansiri, whether he just needs to accept his losses and just move on, leave everyone else to their own devices. I really don't know what is going to be the end of this saga, but unfortunately it doesn't look like it's going to happen very soon, because we all know Chansiri is quite a stubborn guy. Speaking of which, the latest on the future of Danny Rule. He's reportedly been told to cut short his summer holiday by Chansiri. It would be the latest in a long line of clashes between the pair. If Danny Rule doesn't return to the club early, he could be fined, which would be sort of ironic when staff there haven't been paid. But Justin, I feel so sorry for him at this stage. Will somebody please save Danny Rule from this never-ending hell?
In the kindest possible way, if I was Danny Rule, I would tell Chansiri to go fuck himself until every single person at the club is paid. I don't think Chansiri's got a right to make demands here until he starts paying everybody associated with Sheffield Wednesday. Simple.
Simple as that, yeah. Yeah, if I was him, I'd be looking at the Middlesbrough job, going to Rob Edwards and be thinking, well, that's another chance of freedom disappearing. I believe the Werder Bremen job was another one who's being linked with, and that looks to be going too. So what might be the last chance for him is the Leicester job, which is still up in the air for some reason. But even then, you're asking Leicester to part with £5 million, which they may not possibly have, to get him in. So it's just really, really sad, because you've got an incredibly talented young coach here who seems unable to walk away from the job for some reason. that he clearly doesn't want. He's got a boss who he despises. It's such a horrible position for him, because if he's forced to stay in charge, is his stock going to suffer if Wednesday struggle this season? Which, I mean, at the moment it looks like they definitely will be. Has he got to put on a brave face and try to manage a group of players who are pissed off because they're not getting paid? Who knows who's actually going to be playing for them next season, Justin? It's a living nightmare.
It is. And I think in all of this, you've got to think about Sheffield Wednesday fans as well, who, their manager wants out. But I think genuinely, if it's a Chancery-less Sheffield Wednesday, Danny Raw, I think his opinion changes, and the potential of that football club starts to grow a little bit. Danny Raw is in a difficult situation, but at least he can leave. Sheffield Wednesday fans, they're sat here, they're having to go through it all, and until Chancery goes, they can't find any happiness or put a smile on their face, because unfortunately the man the man at the very top of the club, he's not budging, and unfortunately it's a horrible situation.
It's a horrible situation for all involved, isn't it? Including Chancery in that, by the way, because as we've seen with the ongoing issues with wages, it looks like he's struggling to afford it as well. So, no one is really coming out the winner in this whole scenario. So hopefully we find a resolution soon. But as I've alluded to over the past few minutes, I'm struggling to see what that resolution is. But let's talk about some transfer business, Justin. It's been a bit of a slow start to the summer in terms of transfer business, but Wrexham have got their summer underway. They've signed striker Ryan Hardie from Plymouth for a reported fee of £700,000. The 28-year-old scored 10 goals for Argyle last season. I expect it to be the first of many deals they do, Justin, but how about this for a start in your eyes?
This is a really good start. A really, really good start. I think Ryan Hardie is good for double figures in the Championship, and he suffered a lot with injury last season with Plymouth, and he was playing with injury as well. So could he have scored more? Potentially. He was playing in the poor Plymouth team, it's worth bearing that in mind. But for less than £1 million, I think more clubs should have been queuing here. He had a release clause, didn't he? A relegation release clause in his contract. So I'm surprised that other clubs weren't battling out. They may have been, but I didn't see any speculation. That's usually a good sign or a good pointer. And I think to put on that, how highly I rate him, I had him as an outsider for Golden Boot last season. Obviously, you had Liam Cullen, who scored a fair few goals. I had Ryan Hardie. His movement is excellent. His finishing is very good. I like this signing. It's smart investing. None of this 32-year-old 5-year contract bollocks that we know Wrexham go down the route of.
You're more of a fan of this than you were
absolutely
other links that they've had so far this summer, which they still may very well pursue. But this is one that gets the thumbs up from Justin Peach. Yeah, I like Ryan Hardie. He's a very good striker at this level. 10 goals in a struggling Plymouth side is very good going. He's a good link-up player. He was always going to be a great signing for at least half the Championship this summer, particularly at $700,000. That is a bargain in today's market. So I don't have much of an issue with it. The only thing I would say is, if Wrexham's aim is to have a crack at getting promoted again this summer, I'm not sure Ryan Hardie is good enough for that. I genuinely don't know what Wrexham's aims are this season, but when you had Rob McElhenney tweeting not long ago, I don't know the definition of the word consolidation, and keep in mind they've got a blooming documentary to make, they need it to be interesting, so I assume they're going to be aiming high again. I'm not sure Ryan Hardie matches those standards. So that's what I would say. However, half of this podcast was saying a couple of weeks ago that they thought Wrexham could go down. So it depends on what your perspective is on that, Justin.
Yeah, I disagree with Hardie. As I say, I think he's good for double figures. And I think any teams sort of that are 6th and below last season, Ryan Hardie would have been a good signing. We didn't have a good cohort or a good quality cohort of strikers last season. I think if a fit Ryan Hardie's playing, he's going to get 14 or 15 goals, I think, especially in a better team that are creating more chances than Plymouth, because he's a good finisher. He's a very good finisher, an underrated finisher at this level. But I think if Wrexham go along the lines of signing the Ryan Hardies, that sort of recruitment, then I'd be very confident in saying they're not going to get relegated, get promoted. I would agree with you. They probably need a lot more to get promoted, but whether they do that is another question. Whether this is an outlier for what they could, all the 33-year-olds are going to sign this season, this summer is another question. So it's a good start. That's all you can really say.
I will point out that I think you are probably the only person in the world who is using Wrexham and relegation in the same sentence at this very stage.
And
I'm not sure I necessarily agree with him getting into a side below 6th, but I do also take your point that he was living off scraps at Plymouth last season. So, we'll certainly find out, won't we, soon? But you imagine he's going to be their main striker next season because of what he did with Plymouth last season. So it's going to be interesting to see how he gets on. And of course, who else Wrexham bloody sign? Let's go to Norwich City, Justin, who have signed centre-back Harry Darling from Swansea. On a free transfer, the 25-year-olds agreed a 3-year deal after rejecting a new contract to stay in South Wales. Several championship clubs have been linked with him. So it looks like Norwich have fought off a lot of competition to get him. And I think it's a great signing, Justin.
I like it. I like Harry Darling. I think I agree with you. I think it's a great signing. For some reason, I thought he was way older than he was, which I will spin round into a compliment because he plays with aggression, but also under maturity as well. And he's a great wind-up merchant in your team. He's played under Liam Manning. I'm sure it's not appearance related, Harry. That Justin thinks you look older than you are, but we'll leave that there. Yeah, we'll leave that there. I won't bring in anything into doubt or question here. But he's played under Liam Manning at MK Dons, and what Norwich missed last season is someone who's very comfortable on the ball in that defence. Shane Duffy, very solid defender, but he's not a ball-playing centre-half by any means. Harry Darling's a very accomplished one of that. And when you're building from deep, it's a very important thing. So, yeah, good signing and a free transfer as well.
Yeah, well, as far as defenders go, there isn't many better on the ball than him at this level. In terms of actually defending, I think there's room for improvement. But look, he's still only 25. 25 years old. You're getting a player here on a free who's just about to enter his prime years. And he fits the way Liam Manning wants to play perfectly because obviously he's worked with him before. He also gives them some much needed championship experience, which I think they massively underestimated with their recruitment last season. So it's a great move, and I've been very impressed with Norwich in the early weeks of the summer, persuading Liam Manning to join, fighting off a lot of competition to persuade Harry Darling to sign. I think these first few weeks of the summer have been a real statement of intent from them. Justin, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I do. They've really made some forward movements, haven't they? And they needed to, because obviously when you underachieve and sort of finish lower mid-table, and you do have a decent amount of resource from player sales and what have you, you have to start your business early. You've got to be decisive, and Norwich have done that. I think you can criticise a fair few teams in the Championship for not being very proactive. You can't criticise Norwich for not being proactive. They've been very, very good at getting the ball rolling very early on in the summer, and that can pay dividends as soon as you start pre-season, because you've got your squad in as good a place as you want it to be, whereas a lot of other teams will be playing catch-up.
Well, in what could be seen as a direct replacement for Darling, Swansea have signed Ipswich centre-back Cameron Burgess. The 29-year-old was out of contract at Portman Road and has agreed a 3-year deal. It seems to be a fair bit of surprise from Ipswich fans that they're letting him go on a free transfer, Justin. So from that perspective, it's got to be seen as a coup for Swansea.
Yeah, I think it is. I saw the announcement of him leaving, and I immediately thought there should be a lot of clubs in line for a signature, only for Swansea to announce literally minutes later that he'd signed. But he's a strong defensive player. He's a big lad at 6'4". Probably not at Harry Darling's level of playing from the back, but he's certainly capable. And he played a huge part in Ipswich getting promoted. Didn't make as many appearances in Premier League as he probably would have liked. But at 29, he's in his peak years. He's experienced. He's a Hardie defender. He's probably what Swansea need. And probably not a like-for-like replacement for Harry Darling, but a good replacement for Harry Darling.
So one Ipswich fans say our best defender in League One, our best defender in the Championship, and then our best defender in the Premier League. So they clearly love him, and he played the vast majority of their games in the season they got promoted to the Premier League. So I suppose the question is, will he be starting for Ipswich next season where they've got Dara O'Shea and Jacob Greaves? Probably not. And maybe Burgess saw that and thought he needed to move for his own career. So it's a good signing for Swansea, I think. Fits how they want to play as well. I think it makes a lot of sense. By the way, this is Swansea's 4th signing, so they're getting the business done early. Really making moves are the old Swans. And we'll finish off, Justin, with Millwall, who are reportedly set to lose Japhet Tanganga. Several reports say the defender is said to be interested in clubs in the Premier League and abroad, particularly because of a £1.2 million release clause in his contract. 1.2 million, Justin. That would be a bargain for someone, wouldn't it? And a huge blow for the wall.
Yeah, I am surprised that we're not seeing more speculation, to be honest. I'm looking at teams that have just gone up, like Burnley and Sunderland, where if you need a very capable defender for your squad, £1.2 million makes complete sense. I think anyone sort of 14th or below in the Premier League should be all over this.
I have seen Premier League clubs being linked with him. I think he has been linked with Sunderland. Not sure about Burnley, but he's definitely getting a lot of interest, Justin. So it's looking very unlikely he's going to stay. And
why wouldn't you with a £1.2 million release clause? He was one of the best performing defenders last season, certainly one of the most consistent. So losing him for Millwall would be massive. His pairing with Jake Cooper was excellent. And he'll be a very hard player to replace, especially at £1.2 million. So with that, it will be hard to envisage him sticking around at the Den unless Alex Neil really pulls a blinder and convinces him that they're going to push for promotion, it's worth it, etc. But when you see certain clubs linked with him, it's hard to see him staying.
Yeah, I think it's very, very unlikely for Millwall, which is a shame, especially after we were picking them out as a potential dark horse for next season, Justin. That would certainly be a big blow to that particular horse if they were to lose essentially their best player. Because he is their best player, isn't he, I think? And yeah, there's definitely going to be Premier League clubs circling around a player of his quality at 26 years old for that sort of money. So, yeah, 1.2 million, flipping egg. His agent has played an absolute blinder there, hasn't he, in inserting that for any team who's in the top flight level league, because he's almost certainly going to get a big move now, and it's going to be one where a team's definitely going to benefit from him in one way or another. But there we go, ladies and gents. This has been the Second Tier Podcast, and this has been a news roundup from everything going on from across the Championship over the past week. We will, of course, be back again on Sunday, where we'll be picking out our top 10 free agents on the market to Championship clubs. Make sure you join us then for that. Before we go, make sure you give us a like and subscribe wherever you are listening or watching to this podcast. We don't do that enough, Justin. We probably should do it a lot more, but particularly if you're sticking with us throughout the summer, make sure you do that and leave us a review or a comment wherever you are as well, because that goes a long way to helping us grow as a podcast, and we greatly appreciate you taking a couple of minutes of your time just to do that. But there we go, ladies and gents. This has been the Second Tier Podcast. We'll be back again on Sunday. I've been Ryan Dilks.
I've been Justin Peach.
And a big thank you for listening.